Let's go to our media panel now, and good morning to media commentator Dr. Brian Edwards and also to our advertising executive David Wheldon. Let's start with the latest developments in the Fonterra milk crisis. The botulism, that was a botch-up.
The botulism, but this is going to go down as a absolute classic case history in terms of crisis management, or how not to do it, really. I mean, I think, being fair, they were damned if they did and damned if they didn't, in that it was a serious thing. I mean, and you've got an emotional topic. I mean, the feeding of babies, nothing gets more emotional than that. So they had to obviously do something. I thought you were going to say the country's biggest export earner was probably that might get you going. But I mean, we're talking about mums and their babies and their health. And look, I think they had to obviously, once they knew that there had been some kind of cock-up, they had to go out with it. But the big problem was it was very badly managed. There was no front person for Fonterra making the running and being consistent, and I think at some point the media started to fill in a few of those gaps themselves, and the story got probably more air than it really would have ever had. But I feel a bit for Fonterra. I mean, Teo Spearing was overseas at the time when the crisis happened, and there was no one there who seemed to take his place. The chairman, John Wilson, was pretty invisible for about the first 4 or 5 days, and Spearing went straight to China, which was probably the smart thing to do. But in New Zealand, there was a big vacuum. No one filled it. And I understand that their outside PR company had recently kind of given over to some new internal PR people, and those people hadn't quite found their feet. So it was a cock-up, and of biblical proportions, and really unfortunate timing for them. But they did it wrong.
Brian, it struck me if we'd had more journalists who had been, perhaps, to be honest, glad-handed by Fonterra earlier, who had been shown some insight into the way the company's food safety worked, we might have had a media that was more informed in its commentary and its reaction.
Yeah, I think that's possible, but I also think it's very easy to be wise after the event in this sort of situation. I'm inclined to agree with most of what David has said there. But what has happened now is very interesting. It's kind of ironic, really, that we now know there was no danger. And so we have Mr. Spearing's there saying, well, this is really good, it's great, there's no danger. But in a sense, it actually makes it worse, doesn't it, really? Because it was all unnecessary. That's one of the things. But again, coming back to what David said, and I agree, at the time, you were between a rock and a hard place on that. Yeah. Are you going to say, well, just quietly do a recall of this product and hopefully nothing will be wrong? You're then taking the risk that a child dies somewhere, and then it is absolutely
awful. And also
awful.
It looks like you're covering up.
And it looks absolutely terrible. So I think they more or less had to do what they did, really.
I think that the other thing is it came on the back of kind of the meat problem, it came on the back of other issues, and it came at a time when the whole questioning of the 100% pure New Zealand tourism campaign, and people were going, hey, our clean green image is being damaged here, and that's going to have...
Well, there's a curious thing there, isn't it, that apparently the damage has not been nearly as great as people thought. No. That's remarkable. Apparently in China, people are still buying the product. The people I feel sorry for are companies like Nutricia, who have been massively damaged by this, and probably are in a position now where they could sue Fonterra, sue the government or whatever.
And the mums and dads who binned all that formula, which is not cheap, as we know. That is a story that we'll keep on giving, obviously, because we've got all the inquiries yet to come out. Let's move on then, and I guess people are starting to get excited and aware of a sporting event in San Francisco now that the Louis Vuitton is over, the America's Cup is looming, but unlike previous years, Toyota seems to be the only local company here that's making much play or doing much branding around the America's Cup.
I'm actually surprised that anyone sponsors the America's Cup, and I'm sure my advertising friend here is going to disagree with me. No, I'll tell you why. Because yachting is one of the most boring things you can see on television. Yachting does not suit television in any way. The canvas is too big. So you're watching the yachting, you have no idea really. If it wasn't for Ian Taylor's wonderful animations, you would have no idea who was where, who was winning, who was behind. It's a dreary, boring thing to watch.
This time around, Brian, it is more like Formula One, because people are, it's on the knife edge, isn't it?
It's fantastic. And as they keep saying, you're 2 seconds away from disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, look,
look, let's just have a look at the ad and what Toyota's doing with it.
And you can no longer see my love, throw a spark and have a little faith in me. Have a little faith in me. Have a little faith in me.
Look, it's a good ad.
Yeah.
I think the fact that the people are leaning, it links to the dealership, it links to the product, it's good, and it's one of those classic ads that if the sound was off, you'd still know what the hell was going on.
So where are all the other advertisers then?
Well, the reason there are not, look, let's go back. Years ago, when in 1995 or whatever, we had the family of 5 sponsors from New Zealand. We had Steinlager, we had TVNZ, we had Toyota, we had Enza. Remember the Enza things?
Right, yeah.
And we had Lotto. Now they all had a vested interest in publicising it and making it. This time round, we have international sponsors. You've got Omega, you've got Nespresso, you've got Camper, and of course Emirates. So it's a different ball game, and I understand why there are not a lot of there's not a lot of local activity, but I tell you, if we bring this thing home, it'll be fantastic for tourism and it'll be brilliant for all those people.
And I reckon even Brian Edwards might get excited.
No.
Of course you'll get excited, Brian.
I tell you, an interesting thing, I was in the bus the other day and there were 2 women sitting behind me and they were talking about the America's Cup. Yeah. And one of the women said to the other woman, they don't even look like yachts anymore. I mean, a yacht should be a beautiful thing that's actually in the water. You look at these things. This is actually now not a battle of yachting, it's a battle of technologies. Who's got the better technology? Why would you watch...
Talking of technology, I want to move on, and I want to talk...
You got to let him get off the fact that he's making a claim he rides the bus.
I want to move on talking about technology and talk about blogging. I know you do it. One of the most read and most influential political blogs in the country, Kiwi Blog, celebrated its 10th birthday this week. Oh, sorry. We take that again. David Farrar is the person who runs it. He's a pollster and, well, a nat. But Kiwi Blog, it's a good site. It gets lots of hits and it tells us stuff we don't know sometimes.
It's a very good site, and I think he's an absolutely marvellous man. He's a wonderful character to have on television. I'd like to have had him here today because he's such good value.
I feel somewhat...
no, I didn't mean to replace you.
But also the blogosphere for politics and the contest of ideas, the blogosphere is now sort of ground zero.
Well, it's actually the Wild West of journalism now, the blogosphere. That's what it is. And it's absolutely marvellous. There are huge numbers of people doing it. But however, I would say this. It's often a case of never mind the quality, feel the width, as far as blogs are concerned. There are a lot of very poor blogs. And if you're outrageous on your blog and you allow the people who send comments to your blog to be rude and offensive, you'll get more hits.
But Sean, this is just another example of kind of the digital revolution changing the way people get information. And you look at the next election coming up, blogs are going to play a really important role. 600,000 people in a month go to that blog. They have 10 million hits or something over the last 10 years. The figures are staggering. Now, it is a way where political parties in particular, and we've just seen in the lineup earlier today, that those guys are going to be using blogs, and the parties will be taking it seriously because social media, of which blogs are an important part, get passed on, and this is going to be the new... Brian says it's the Wild West. It's the new frontier.
You'd love to have as many hits as David Farrar, wouldn't you?
I would love to have as many hits, but then it is a matter of quantity or quality. Not in David's case, but in other cases, whale oil, for example, you know. And there are certain blogs that are regarded with great respect by people.
I'll tell you one thing, Dave. I interviewed David Farrar about this last week, and he said, I still would earn more money working at McDonald's than I make off that that website. Well, so monetising that's very difficult too.
Yeah, well, I don't know. They will find a way. Let me tell you though, blogs are here to stay, and they're going to be really increasingly important in the political landscape.
Yeah,
you just watch.
And Kiwi Blog could afford a very good party, which I understand our producer had a good time at.
I think their influence may be a bit diluted by the sheer number that there are now. If you look at Bryce Edwards, who keeps a sort of list and comments on what's in the different blogs, that list is getting longer and longer and longer and longer. It's quite amazing, really.
Brian, David, thank you both for joining us.